Well, it's Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I'm Charles Schultz, and this is the Randomizer for February 24th, 2022. And tonight, our term is going to be a little different. It is metaphysics. Now, we hear the word bandied around a lot by a lot of New Age people these days, but it actually has quite a significant beginning and history. So metaphysics is an interesting subject, and it's been rather conscripted or hijacked, if you will, over the last few decades. We're going to talk about that very shortly and look at what the original intent was and kind of where it's led us in recent times. I would also like to encourage everyone to go to schultzlaboratories.com or universesciencecenter.com. Get a subscription with us, support what we're doing, get your Oculus, wander around in the galleries and explore a little, share it with your friends, and help us to add more galleries and more content. We're growing every day, we're adding more things to our library, and we see it as a universally available education project that should benefit a lot of people. And we're very serious about promoting it and making it as available as Wikipedia or Google or anything else. That being said, we're also doing our Monday evening classes. Meta World will have lesson 5 coming up Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be looking at some of the more interesting aspects of our advancements in technology toward nanotech. We're going to be talking about doorways between worlds and creating other realities and how we can bring some of those things into the real world. So it's going to be an extremely interesting discussion. So metaphysics, what does it all mean? If anybody is familiar with a little bit of Latin, you know meta generally is that which is above or beyond something. Now physics is an easily understood term, and it generally refers to all of the things in the real world and how they interact, such as movement and force and transfer of momentum and light and energy. So physics is a well-defined field, and we've learned an awful lot about it, but it has quite a venerable history. It goes back thousands of years, and the Greeks were actually known for having a well-developed set of rules about physics. But what is metaphysics? So Plato is probably the person, and reading what I have, I see that he is actually responsible for creating the term. He's the one most responsible for its initial incarnation, if you will. You see, it was recognized by many people that the world of matter, the world of stuff, had some very specific rules to it. And this is, of course, where physics derives from, understanding those rules. But when you get right down to it, Plato thought that there was another sort of abstract world, which was of concepts, of perfect forms, devoid of matter. Now, this is easy to understand in a sense, because we know that nothing in this world is perfect. We can imagine a perfect sphere or a perfect cube, and we can even write an equation to define it. But you will never in this world see an absolutely perfect square or cube or sphere, for the very simple reason that matter itself is made of little granular components known as atoms or particles below that. And so as a result, the things that we make have an inherent graininess to them. And if you try to make things smaller and smaller and smaller, you eventually run up against a limit where you can't make those forms anymore because the pieces are larger than the form you're trying to make. So it's kind of like making a perfect sphere out of Lego blocks. You can't do it. You can't generate that simple, smooth surface. So now, metaphysics actually in his time referred to the thought that there might be considered an ideal place where perfect examples of things could be said to reside. And this sounds a little odd, but give it a moment here. There is actually a place where your thinking would encounter this exact thought. In his ideal world of form, devoid of matter, he laid out the thought that perhaps there was a place where the perfect sphere concept existed, the perfect cube concept existed. And so we can see pretty easily, yeah, that could be, it's the world of mathematics does support those, and we can easily, as I stated, write an equation to define them. But he went a little further. He even went so far as to say there were certain other concepts, and I don't believe he used the word abstract to represent them, but that some of them might even involve states of being, actions and things without the actual matter attached. That's kind of an interesting thought. And the only people I know who really fall into that and follow that would be maybe psychologists, mathematicians, programmers. And if you stop and think for a moment, there could be such a place in a sense. Anytime you program a virtual world or generate a computer graphic, you are modeling things using the mathematical structure of it, the mathematical model. And you can create as much resolution as you wish based only on the power of your computer, the resolution it will support, and the time you have to compute it. So, in a sense, computer graphic worlds more or less represent that ideal world in a sense. But then we have to consider some other things. Some of the things that are metaphysical, above and beyond the normal pale, would be things such as abstract items. And somebody goes, what's an abstract object? Mathematics, for instance, a number. I can say, okay, this is 5 of something. But 5 isn't something you can put in a jar and say, I've got it and nobody else can have it now. 5 is not a solid thing. It is an abstract. And so you can have, 3 here and 2 there, that's 5. There is a principle we recognize mentally as being fiveness, I suppose you could say, and it isn't a real thing, and you can't point to it except as an example. So this is an abstract, and in a fair sense, that would exist in this ideal world of Plato's. But here's the issue. People will often take a term, and they'll conscript it for their own use and change it. When we hear metaphysics today, it's often used in ways that has nothing whatsoever to do with what Plato's idea was. And here's the problem, and it was compounded very early on. After Plato's death, his notes and writings were corrected. They were taken, rewritten, edited, and altered in a sense. Now, the basic concept was still there, but it was kind of aimed in a way that wasn't, I don't think, 100% fidelity in terms of what he was thinking. And so his editor had something to do with how it was interpreted, and it may have steered people a little bit the wrong way, or it may have clarified some thinking for others. But I think that in all fairness, you would have to have his original text to understand truly what he was getting at. But today, when somebody refers to metaphysics, they're often talking about New Age, unsupported, unreasonable things. Now, in a recent discussion, I was talking to somebody about this, and they pointed out that, well, a lot of people will say, if you want something, you can manifest it through thinking about it. Well, that's pretty metaphysical, but it's not at all what Plato had in mind. Now, it's true that quantum mechanics shows that certain states will be, well, for instance, if your state of mind is a certain way, your perception of a thing is a certain way, it could possibly influence it. And there were some tests done years ago where people were generating random numbers, and they were asked to think about the numbers before they were generated. And they tested without people intending and with people intending. And oddly, there did seem to be some skew in the numbers when people were intending a certain result or expecting a certain result. Nobody can really quite explain that. And some people would say, well, yeah, in the quantum world, we do seem to influence things. Obviously, it is often said in what's known as the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics that the event doesn't become real until an observer observes it. You see, this leaves us kind of dangling, because what is an observer? Does that mean a conscious mind with an eyeball, or something able to take the pulse? Or does it mean a photocell hooked to a camera or a computer? Observation, you see, in this case, is actually not very well, it's not well defined. And I would think that since a system, such as a photocell and a relay, could detect a specific light level and respond to it, it might be considered an observer. Perhaps the reactions of things in the world around the event might be considered the observer. It's the old psychological, or I should say, philosophical question. if a tree falls in the forest and there's nobody around, does it make a noise? Yeah, it does shake the air. It does create sound waves. I would suppose you'd have to say yes, even if there's nobody there to observe or hear it. So the definition of observer is very important in this context. The other thing is people who believe that you can wish for a thing or think of a thing and it will simply manifest. Maybe, but I'm more of a pick up a shovel kind of guy. I think if you want a thing to happen, you really need to get out there with some tools and some materials and make it happen. Now, I will admit, there are many times in my life when I've thought, boy, it sure would be nice if, and something has occurred. And I can't claim one way or the other whether my desire for that caused it to happen or if it was just on the way. And it sure would be nice if you lived in a world where you could imagine a thing and get what you want. But that obviously is not what Plato had in mind. That is a modern day interpretation of metaphysics. And, again, we will often run into people who will claim certain things, free energy devices, magical, use this copper bracelet and your arthritis goes, that isn't metaphysics. That's basically mysticism, magic. And until somebody can actually catch that thing by the throat, you don't know if it exists. Many people claim the existence of magic or influence or whatever you want to call it. And I think here is where we tread on very thin ice, particularly when we're dealing with the real world. In many ways, Descartes' view of the clockwork universe works extremely well. We know that if we aim the pool cue and the ball in a certain way, it's going to follow a very well-defined path. It is only at the really fringes and edges where you start seeing quantum effects or weird or goofy effects. And yes, it's true. In many cases, there can be things going on in the world that we cannot fully define or cannot fully predict. And the fact is, many people, even famous scientists, often thought that the moment we start exploring the unknown worlds of this sort, that's when we're really going to make some progress. Well, that could be true. But the fact is, science has worked so very well with all of the things we've explored so far that it's really hard to put down as a tool. So metaphysics has its face, and it has a very interesting side. And if you're somebody who programs virtual worlds or writes software or does psychological evaluations, absolutely, I can see where there's a great deal of utility in the idea of perfect concepts, structures and forms. It certainly does lend itself well to mathematical structures, and we can learn a lot from that. But when it comes down to certain decisions or certain sorts of things happening, then it can become very difficult to pin down solidity. And I'm going to mute this one microphone right here. There we go, not a problem. So, metaphysics, an interesting study, and something that if you really want to understand, you need to read the original works of Plato that you can get your hands on, and you'll find out very clearly what he implied. Because think about it, there are many things, this is another thing, there are many things that exist in our world only because of the pre-existence of other things, and many of them are considered conditions. For instance, a haircut. Does a perfect haircut exist in this world of ideas? You can look at things and you can say, well, that is a state. And here's where we step into logic and programming again. Many of the things that you might think of as being abstract or perfect versions of in Plato's idea of the metaphysical world are actually states that you can write into software or machinery, decision-making processes. We can recognize the state of the lid being off of a jar, but that state is not a thing that you would exist a perfect model of existing in his metaphysical world, the world of form. So I think that there, when we start really analyzing it, we run into some things that look like bottlenecks in our thinking process, or possibly even paradoxes. So I believe that there's a great deal of use for this world of form, and from a the original metaphysical standpoint, it has a lot of utility. And, maybe sometimes considering the perfect form of a thing is the first step to building our imperfect real world version of it by wrapping the metal around an idea and making it function. So at this point, I'm going to open the floor to any questions that anybody might have. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and hawk my wares again. Please go to SchultzLaboratories.com or UniverseScienceCenter.com. Get your Oculus, walk around in our galleries, study them, become a member. Join our classes that happen every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Become a subscriber, a member of our group, and help us build more galleries and add a lot more content. And always bring us your ideas, comments, anything along those lines that could help us become more productive and more useful, or even correct an error or become more utilitarian. We're always open for your suggestions, and we're very grateful for all the people who are members and who support us. So the floor is open. If anybody has any questions about metaphysics that I can answer for you, I will certainly do that. And by the way, I do have my quote for tonight, and oddly, it is right in line with the lesson. It is a quote from Matthew 7, verse 7 and 8. And it says, "Ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. For everyone that asketh receiveth, and he that seeketh." So I think that's rather interesting. If you believe in metaphysics and you like that Bible verse, more power to you. Things could happen. So at this point, thank you everybody for showing up tonight. I appreciate you being here. And I think it's been an interesting lesson. There's much more to say about it, of course. 15 minutes isn't a long time. Does anyone have a question before I go?
Hi, Charles. This is Elizabeth.
Okay.
Yes, metaphysics. What a fantastic subject tonight. And thank you so much for that. I actually had more of an announcement to make.
Okay.
And that's that also Schultz Laboratories and, of course, Universe Science Center, we are looking for anyone who wants to teach. If there are teachers or engineers who want to teach basic skills, trades, anything, they can teach it from the walls of the Universe Center. And so please message us, connect with us. This is something that can be done right away.
Oh, that's correct. Well, that's absolutely a great point. I'm inside our physics hallway right now with the structure of matter, and we can set up a classroom custom made to anybody who wishes to teach. If you want to teach math or physics or number theory or even anything else, we can create a gallery or a classroom for you that meets your specifications and that students can come into and see and interact with your material. So that's absolutely a perfect point. Thank you for that, Elizabeth.
And happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is my birthday. I'm 64 today. And like I said to people, I'm still climbing trees and running down the block like a maniac. So age doesn't seem to have slowed me down, either tempered me or anything. So, well, everybody, have a wonderful evening, and thank you again for coming. I really enjoy talking to everybody and sharing a little bit of things. Hopefully, this makes the world a little better for all of us. And do that. Go out there and make the world a better place for having lived in it. Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.